A single drop of blood rolls down Iron Man's cracked helmet. Cut. Thanos raises the completed Infinity Gauntlet and snaps his fingers. Silence. Half the universe dissolves into ash. Peter Parker clutches Tony Stark's arm, whispering, "Mr. Stark, I don't feel so good." The camera cuts again. Wakanda's battlefield, once blazing with defiance, now fades into silence. Black Panther vanishes, Wanda fades, Groot reaches out as dust. Thor hurls Stormbreaker with the fury of a god, but he is too late. These are just 30 seconds of high-voltage montage, and yet they shatter the illusion of superhero invincibility. What we're exploring today isn't just a billion-dollar spectacle, it's a cinematic myth shattered from within. A film that strips its heroes of divine power and confronts us with the raw grammar of helplessness. Infinity War doesn't follow the formula. It breaks it. In every failure lies a metaphor for the real world: technological arrogance, cold logic, divided societies, collapsing ideals. Thanos' snap isn't an ending. It's the final blow to the traditional hero narrative. And so we ask, why did the directors let the villain win? Why was Tony Stark spared? Why must the one path to victory involve unbearable loss, silence, and shared trauma? This is not just a story about war. It's a meditation on inevitability, sacrifice, and the fragile thread that binds collective hope. If the villain is right, what future do we deserve? At the helm of Infinity War were two of Hollywood's most unexpected architects of destruction, Anthony and Joe Russo. Their background wasn't built on explosive action or superhero lore, but on satirical comedies like Arrested Development and Community. That's what gave them an edge. They didn't revere the mythology, they were ready to deconstruct it. From the beginning, the Russo brothers had one mission: no more heroes save the day endings. As they put it, we didn't want another film where the good guys win and the audience cheers. That structure belongs to another era. What they wanted was tension born of despair, a slow collapse, not a sudden explosion. Writers Christopher Marcus and Stephen McFeely became their instruments of subversion. They approached the script not as a war story, but as a Greek tragedy. Thanos was the protagonist. The Avengers? Merely flawed humans caught in the gears of a collapsing system. Early drafts had Tony Stark dying on Titan and Steve Rogers sacrificing himself for Vision. But after intense back and forth with Marvel Studios president Kevin Feige, they preserved these characters, saving their most emotional payoffs for Endgame. The production itself was full of knife-edge decisions. Thanos' design alone went through 3 major iterations. Early versions were deemed too humanoid and lacked gravitas. The final version blended raw power with unsettling intellect, made possible by Josh Brolin's performance capture brilliance and Weta Digital's cutting-edge VFX. The much-anticipated Battle of Wakanda was originally conceived with a 7-minute single-take tracking shot of the Avengers fighting side by side. The idea was ambitious, but prohibitively expensive. In the final cut, that vision was broken into kinetic fragments, the emotional weight preserved through editing rhythm and visual language. And then there was the snap. Executives feared it. Test audiences were shaken. But the Russos stood their ground. If it doesn't hurt, it won't last. So the unthinkable happened. Half of the heroes were dusted. The credits rolled in silence. This wasn't just bold storytelling. It was rebellion against the very rules of blockbuster cinema. And it worked. Because in a world oversaturated with happy endings, pain became the most honest note a film could play. This wasn't just about loss. It was about the limits of power, the failure of unity, and the fragile illusion of moral clarity. It was a film made not for cheer, but for reckoning. If Infinity War's emotional arc is a slow descent into despair, then its visual language is the scalpel that makes every cut intentional. Consider the scene where Thanos sacrifices Gamora. The entire sequence unfolds on the bleak cliffs of Ormur, bathed in lifeless blue-gray tones. The camera ascends, then looks down, Gamora on her knees, Thanos' silhouette framed like a priest at a sacrificial altar. When he cries, the camera doesn't comfort. It confronts. A tight, disorienting close-up captures his tears, not to humanize, but to alienate. It's not empathy, it's dogma. He cries not for love, but for the price of his own prophecy. It's a surgical dismantling of the savior archetype. And Thanos, despite being labeled a villain, is clearly the film's central figure. He's not a madman. He's a strategist, a fatalist, a philosopher of genocide. What makes him terrifying isn't brute force, its ideological coherence. He truly believes in mercy through annihilation. He calls it balance. He sees himself as a gardener of destiny. In contrast, the Avengers are fragmented ideologues imprisoned by their own values. Tony Stark is the narrative anchor, haunted by visions since Iron Man 3. Here, he isn't the charming genius billionaire. He's a near-broken man building nanotech not to dominate, but to outrun destiny. His armor is vapor-like, almost intangible. His interactions with Peter Parker are not teacher to student, they're father to son, drenched in unspoken dread about generational ruin. Doctor Strange, in his trance on Titan, sees 14 million futures. His surrender isn't defeat, it's strategy. He plays the long game. He is the film's silent philosopher, revealing that losing sometimes is the only path to winning. His role transcends combat. He becomes the film's fatalist compass. Scarlet Witch, Wanda, is the film's emotional apex. Her powers are destruction and connection combined. In the moment she destroys the Mind Stone, killing Vision, she becomes the film's moral crucible. But Thanos rewinds it all. Sacrifice is undone. Love is irrelevant in the face of systemic power. It's a brutal meditation on whether human emotion stands a chance against absolute control. Cultural design plays a subtextual role. Thanos' throne, ship, and armor evoke a neoclassical totalitarian aesthetic, symmetry, dark metals, sharp lines. He is less a brute than a fallen Caesar, obsessed with order. The Infinity Stones are more than MacGuffins. They represent the human desire to control every aspect of existence: time, mind, soul, space, reality, power. Together, they form a dark mirror of our pursuit of technological singularity. This isn't just about a villain winning, it's about civilization's unconscious longing for control through elimination. Visually, the film consistently diminishes the hero's spatial dominance. Wide shots place characters in the corners, dwarfed by endless cosmos or collapsing landscapes. The Guardians float like dust in a ruined nebula. On Titan, Stark and Thanos shrink within craggy geometry, mere insects before inevitability. This visual reduction amplifies the narrative's existential dread. The individual is helpless in the machinery of fate. It's not just a battle. It's a myth being dismantled. Not the end of heroes, but the end of the idea that heroes always win. If the Avengers 2012 was a heroic overture, Infinity War is its dissonant requiem, a fractured tragedy told through an orchestrated chaos of parallel stories. The Russo brothers abandon linearity in favor of something more disorienting: narrative simultaneity. 6 storylines, 5 character clusters, 3 planetary settings, all colliding toward one inevitable endpoint: the snap. This film isn't a linear progression, it's a narrative constellation. Think of Infinity War as a narrative stitching engine. Instead of merging every thread into a neat tapestry, it allows tension to bloom from their friction. Wakanda, Titan, Earth, Vormir, the spaceship, the locations aren't just backdrops. They're psychological theaters, orbiting the gravitational pull of Thanos' mission. Each line races against time, but in different directions. This fragmentation creates a uniquely modern psychological effect. The viewer is aware of collapse long before it happens. You feel the unraveling, but can't stop it. Just like real-world systemic crises, asynchronous, disorienting, and impossible to fully grasp until the moment of implosion. This is a narrative confusion. It's structured entropy, a simulation of modernity. And then there's the character structure. Infinity War dares to violate the hero's journey. Traditionally, a central protagonist must undergo growth, failure, insight, and redemption. But here, who is the protagonist? Tony Stark? Thor? Doctor Strange? Or Thanos? That's the film's provocation. No one is the protagonist, or perhaps everyone fails. This ambiguity is not a bug, it's the point. The Russo brothers disassemble the narrative logic of victory. Instead of reinforcing the comforting myth that justice prevails, they confront us with something colder. What if justice is fragmented beyond repair? And this provokes critical division. The New York Times praised the film as one of the rare superhero stories that understands failure as narrative. Meanwhile, The Guardian criticized its fragmented structure as emotionally incoherent. Some scholars went further, labeling it algorithmic storytelling, an ensemble film designed like a combinatory matrix of interchangeable pieces. But the irony is, even if algorithmic, we cried. We broke when Spider-Man begged for life. We felt the silence in Wakanda. We mourned the dust. So what does that say? It means Infinity War is more than structural experimentation. It's a psychological study of emotional delay. A film that doesn't just tell a story. It distributes grief over time, across space, through characters. A cinema of deferred tragedy. To truly understand the razor-sharp metaphor behind Infinity War, one must look beyond the explosions and deaths, and dive into its philosophical core and systemic design. This isn't a film about superheroes. It's an allegory about collective human failure. Let's start with Thanos. He isn't a tyrant in the classic sense. He's an eco-radical with a chilling logic. The universe is finite, he says. Its resources are finite. If life is left unchecked, it will cease to exist. He doesn't kill out of hate. He kills with a sense of civic duty. It's not personal, it's arithmetic. Sound familiar? It's the same cold rationale behind downsizing in corporations, wartime collateral damage, algorithmic sentencing, and population control policies. Thanos is the embodiment of bureaucratic evil, not mad, but methodical. And that's what makes him terrifying. His decisions aren't rogue chaos, they are institutional reasoning taken to its logical extreme. Thanos' worldview is a dark mirror of real-world systems that sacrifice the few for the sake of the many. Drone strikes in the name of peace, herd immunity in public health, climate technocracy that values metrics over people. He isn't breaking order, he's defending a brutalized version of it. In response, the Avengers don't act with moral clarity, they react emotionally. Every major character is torn between personal love and collective logic. Tony Stark is willing to bet the universe if it means saving just one Peter. Wanda Maximoff destroys the Mind Stone, killing Vision, but with such anguish that her pain redefines the word sacrifice. Steve Rogers declares, "We don't trade lives." Noble? Yes. Naive? Absolutely. But it's a final stand for human dignity in a utilitarian nightmare. Every Avenger is placed inside a paradox. One must decide who to sacrifice, Wanda. One acts knowing it's already too late, Thor. One sees the truth, but keeps silent, Doctor Strange. One tries to correct the past, but fails the future, Tony. None of their choices are clean, but all resist the cold logic of the algorithm. They aren't saving the universe. They're saving empathy. And that's what elevates the film. It becomes an allegory about the erosion of emotional intelligence in modern society. Think about it. Every major defeat in the movie doesn't stem from lack of power, it stems from lack of trust. The Avengers are still divided. Steve and Tony haven't reconciled. S.H.I.E.L.D. is gone. There's no central coordination. The Guardians fail to synchronize with the Avengers. Star-Lord's emotional outburst sabotages the plan. These aren't plot holes. They are cultural truths. Why do systems collapse? Not because we lack heroes, but because we no longer believe in each other. And that answers a long-standing creative riddle. Why did Infinity War have to end in failure? Not for shock value. Not just to set up a sequel, but to pose a deeper question. If you possess all the power, but lose compassion, trust, and shared purpose, are you still humanity? Thanos didn't win because he was stronger. He won because humanity was already fractured. When Infinity War hit theaters in 2018, what followed was not applause, but silence. Audiences sat still as the white screen faded into credits. It wasn't just a movie ending, it was an emotional evacuation. How could a film built around failure, where the villain wins, gross over $2 billion globally and become a cultural landmark? Because it didn't just defy expectations. It held up a mirror to something few blockbusters dare address, collective powerlessness. The emotional impact varied across demographics. Younger viewers were devastated by Spider-Man's "I don't want to go" moment, confronting mortality through a teenager's fear. Older audiences engage more with Thanos' philosophy, wrestling with the implications of resource scarcity, overpopulation, and utilitarian logic. In non-Western regions, Asia, Africa, Latin America, Thanos' vision of population correction sparked broader discussions about global inequality, imperial resource extraction, and climate triage. This wasn't just entertainment. It was a global philosophical event. But the most controversial question raised was about responsibility. Who's to blame? Thanos? Tony Stark? Star-Lord's impulsive breakdown? The absent cosmic deities? Or humanity itself? Thanos may be the executioner, but his logic is unervingly rational. He doesn't kill for fun. He believes in cause-effect ethics. He's the villain, but he's executing a broken system's logic with brutal precision. And what about the heroes? They splintered. They hesitated. They were overwhelmed by emotion. They lacked coordination, communication, and foresight. This film doesn't hand you a scapegoat. It builds a fog of distributed failure, a reflection of today's systemic crises. When climate systems collapse, when economic bubbles burst, when pandemics spread, who's to blame? No one, or everyone. And that's what makes Infinity War so relevant. It doesn't simplify guilt. It multiplies it. But perhaps the most disturbing element is its ethical transgression. Is Thanos wrong? Yes. But is his logic entirely incoherent? No. And that's the horror. When violence is detached from cruelty and motivated by rational good, our moral radar falters. This is Infinity War's greatest triumph and most dangerous risk. It forces you to confront your own ethical fault lines before you can condemn the villain. Thanos destroys half the universe. But first, he makes you question how many necessary evils you've tolerated for the greater good. If you walk down the street right now and someone snapped their fingers, could you guarantee half the world wouldn't vanish? What once was a meme now reads more like a cautionary prophecy. Because we are living in an era of increasing snap logic. From early pandemic debates about letting the elderly die to save the economy, to climate triage policies prioritizing survival by region or class. From self-driving cars programmed to minimize loss via calculated sacrifice, to algorithmic layoffs and AI replacing human labor, Infinity War wasn't predicting a supervillain's rise. It was exposing the endgame of our current logic systems. And most terrifying part? The film doesn't offer a fix. It just snaps. And then it turns to us and asks, when resources are limited, who gets to live? When saving the planet conflicts with economic growth, who gets cut? When emotion and morality are replaced by efficiency and data, what remains of empathy? These questions aren't sci-fi anymore. They're the news cycle. They're your next push notification. The fragmented crises we're living, climate collapse, AI displacement, inflation, global distrust, mirror the fractured narrative of Infinity War. Each storyline spirals toward chaos. No character can see the full map. And just like the film's heroes, we fight alone, overwhelmed, divided. And so the film asks its hardest question. Have we entered the post-consensus age? Once we believed that unity could save us. Infinity War says otherwise. Unity isn't a belief, it's a muscle. It must be practiced, paid for, maintained. Are we ready for that kind of effort? Because in the film, the one path to victory, the one timeline Doctor Strange sees, isn't built on power. It's built on grief, on delay, on loss. Only through utter collapse can the right conditions for survival emerge. That's not cinematic fatalism. That's modern global realism. And the film's refusal to offer simple solution? That's a mirror. There are no saviors, no quick patches. No perfect victories. There's only one tool left. The courage to face the truth. In the age of misinformation, post-truth, and institutional decay, Infinity War doesn't hand us heroes. It hands us a cultural mirror and says, will you accept that the system has failed before it destroys what's left of hope? Perhaps it's time we strip the revenge from Avengers. And remember its true root. To avenge equals to take responsibility for an old wound. Infinity War didn't end at the cinema. The moment Thanos snapped his fingers and half the universe turned to dust, it ignited an aftershock across digital and academic culture. First came the social media implosion. The hashtag Thanos did nothing wrong trended globally as users volunteered to be snapped for universal balance. Reddit executed a real-life simulation. Admins deleted half the subreddit members to reenact the snap. Those left behind posted in stunned silence. Spider-Man's "I don't feel so good" line became a meme, a t-shirt, a viral TikTok sound. It even appeared in psychology classes as a case study in virtual grief response. This wasn't just a movie anymore. It had become a secular ritual of digital myth-making. Then came fan-created cultural explosions. On YouTube, TikTok, and Weibo, fans remixed, recontextualized, and rewrote the film. Viewers turned into creators, amplifying emotion in feedback loops of collective storytelling. Some equated Thanos with real-world authoritarian figures, constructing aesthetics of technocratic power. Others used Doctor Strange's one outcome to frame debates on determinism versus free will. New creators folded the snap into their own multiverse sagas, birth of a DIY extended Marvel mythology. But even academia couldn't stay away. Ethicists invoked Kant's categorical imperative, arguing Thanos' logic is internally consistent but morally corrupt. Sociologists saw him as the extreme caricature of modern bureaucratic coldness. Psychologists studied post-film grief reports to examine digital mourning and its impact on real-world crisis perception. Infinity War has become more than a movie, it's a cultural operating system. Clapperboard recommended films, hidden thematic companions. Children of Men, 2006. A world without children becomes a quiet apocalypse. It's the clearest cinematic sibling to Infinity War's grief-saturated collapse of continuity and hope. Coherence, 2013. A brilliant low-budget film exploring parallel timelines over a dinner party. Echoes the multiversal stress of Doctor Strange's foresight scenes. Annihilation, 2018. A shimmering biological force erases identity. Mirrors Infinity War's metaphysical horror of existence being rewritten. The Congress, 2013. A hybrid of animation and live action, this film interrogates identity, control, and digital erasure. Think of it as Thanos' snap told through a lens of capitalist surrealism. Books recommended books, deep dives. Technopoly, Neil Postman. A must-read to understand how tech logic overrides human values. Explains why Thanos isn't evil, he's simply the algorithm taken too far. The Culture of Narcissism, Christopher Lasch. How modern self-obsession erodes communal bonds. Mirrors the Avengers' inability to unite before the snap. States of Denial, Stanley Cohen. A sociological examination of how societies deny large-scale trauma. Applies directly to the silent credits post-snap. Homo Deus, Yuval Noah Harari. Charts humanity's journey to godhood. Warns of the perils of power untempered by empathy. Infinity War distilled into theory. I don't feel so good. Peter Parker's last line before he turns to dust. It's the voice of a child facing death. But when you revisit Infinity War, you realize it's not just Peter's line. It's ours. In a world where speed outruns meaning, where systems collapse silently, where logic replaces empathy, and crises come with no warning, we've all whispered that line. I don't feel so good. It's not a script. It's a signal. A sign that something inside us is cracking, and we don't know how to stop it. The directors didn't try to comfort you. They didn't lie with cinematic optimism. They showed you something unfiltered. Humanity doesn't lose to Thanos. Humanity loses to disconnection. And now, the film doesn't end. It hands you a riddle. Philosophical question 1. If the Avengers had won, if the snap had been stopped, would Infinity War still be iconic? Do we crave heroic victories, or did we just stumble into something more real than we expected? Philosophical question 2. If you were Doctor Strange and saw the only winning path required everyone you love to die, would you still choose it? Could you destroy the people closest to you to save the rest? These aren't plot devices. They're mirrors. And in that reflection, Infinity War becomes more than film. It becomes a test of values. In the comments, drop just one emoji to describe how Infinity War made you feel. Skull? Broken heart? Brain? Milky Way? We want to know when the snap hit. What turned to dust inside you?